Hello, Sumana. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Leaders in Clinical Research. Today we are interviewing Sumana Jeddy. She is the CEO of Jeddy Wellness. And Sumana, thank you so much for your time and for being here today to talk about this important topic.
Delighted to be here. Delighted to support you. I love your purple background and I can't wait to dive in. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to do this live, Taya. It's been such a awesome collaboration with you in Mending Medicine. So this is just like, I'm so happy that I get to see you live.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sumana. Yes, I'm very excited to talk about this. So, um, you have a history in healthcare as well. Would you please give your background for the viewers so they know where you're coming from?
Yes, absolutely. So, healthcare has been like my life. That's been who I've been my whole life. Started my undergraduate journey, first starting to dip my toes into life sciences and medical, and then I was like, no, this isn't going to work out for me. So went into microbiology, fell in love with just the genetics, the microbiology of viruses and bacteria, and love genetics so much that I'm like, oh my goodness, I think I want to be like a virologist or a microbiologist. So did that, worked in the lab for many, many years, did a whole bunch of research, published a whole bunch of papers. I still have one that is going to be published pretty soon here. So that was really exciting. And then moved into public health. I got my master's in public health because, again, I really wanted to learn more about the disease side of world, but didn't really want to be in the wet lab. Starting to get carpal tunnel from all the pipetting. I was like, I can't do this. And plus, I'm a people person. I wanted to be with people, and lab work can be very isolating. So I was like, no, I got to get out of this. So moved into public health, and now I own my own company, and I talk about wellness research.
Oh, yes. And you had mentioned too, when you were in that healthcare position, you were a manager. So you were responsible for other people. And did that add to the stress level? Did you feel like you were coming up against some kind of roadblocks and leading to a burnout type phase?
Yeah. So, it's really weird how burnout is like a silent killer, silent crisis. You don't really know that it's coming at you. And then before you
Hmm.
know it, you hear it from every single person. They'll be like, I had no idea. And then boom, I hit that
Hmm.
brick wall, right? So there's a lot of that commonality. Sure, there was a little bit of learning because I was managing a team of analysts. I was working with a lot of stuff with data that I didn't really know very well. It was a different experience to go into that promotional space where you're like, oh, I was a scientist and now I'm a manager and I'm supporting this team. I had a stroke of bad luck. I think I'm going to just call it bad luck and leave it at that. But a lot of a turnover was happening around the time that I was hired.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of just instability, right? And as a manager, you're doing your own job. Also, a manager, a female manager, the only one that is in the team in this massive department, the only one who's new to the role, you start to feel, I think I need to do more. I think I need to do extra. I need to do extra. So you take on more and more and more and more. And it
Hmm.
wasn't the management of the people per se. I think it was the lack of support from the department and how managers were, basically there was no protocol for managers. You're like, here you go, here's your job, just do it.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that is common too in our industry. And when you deal with companies and you're trying to explain to them why their employee wellness is important and how it impacts their bottom line, um, can you kind of walk us through that? What would you present to like the C-suite levels? I know a lot of times in our industry there's such high turnover, but the high turnover does impact the bottom line of what the company can bring in. So
Yeah.
how does that conversation usually go?
The bottom line, if I could just say it in one word or one sentence, I would say your high performers, your talented team members are leaving. Why?
Mhm.
I think if you start to ask them a very simple question, like, why are your talented high performers leaving the organization? You'll start to realize very quickly, the executives start to really figure out, like, "Ah, well, I don't know. It can't be me. I'm not the problem."
Mhm.
And for the most part, they are not the problem. I think there's just a systemic problem that can alleviate burnout. But when you start to really present that information, saying, these people are suffering, your asset, your strongest asset is your team, and your team is not able to function. And if they
Mhm.
can't function, who's going to do the work? You're going to suffer, and eventually all the goals of the organization are not going to be met. So it's kind of a lose-lose. So if you want a win-win, let's start to take care of our employees. They're the ones who are the backbone of the organization. So we've got to make sure that they are given the wellness priorities and the support that they need so they don't burn out. So prevention has always been my end game, because
Mhm.
once you hit that brick wall, recovery does take quite a bit of time, years sometimes for people, right? Women, especially, because exhaustion typically happens in women. The inefficacy component typically happens in men, right? So as you're going through the spectrum of burnout, the exhaustion can sometimes become chronic, and you're like, I can't get
Mhm.
out of this. So I've heard these stories from multiple women, and it's really quite sad. Like, I was able to get out of it in about 3 months. I went back to work and I was like, yes, let's go. But the side effects still continued in my body for, I would say, about 13 months after.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, leaders just need to know that your high performers are leaving. Why?
And I know you have 10 years experience at least in this area. So from your experience as an expert, what do you see in these companies? Is there a pattern of what a healthy company would look like versus an unhealthy company? Are there signs that the employees can be alerted to? I guess would be my question.
That's a really good question. I think some of the signs would be, again, like, am I able to have, the conversation? Like, how many wellness conversations? I don't even say like mental health anymore. I just put it under the wellness umbrella. I'd say, how
Mhm.
is the culture looking like? If I go into the workplace, am I noticing within the first 2 to 3 months that no one really talks about wellness? There's this overall culture of overwork. That's basically what you're doing. The
Mhm.
culture is, if you don't stay past 5 o'clock, if you're not working to 7, that means you're lazy, right? You better be working a little bit later, because that's just the culture of it. Are you checking emails on the weekends? You better be checking emails on the weekend, because that's the culture,
Mhm.
right? So you feel obligated as employees to feel like, well, if my boss is doing it, then of course I have to do it. But then how I react and how my body reacts, say if you have children and other responsibilities, you're taking care of a sick parent, how is that going to really benefit me? And eventually you can't keep up with the way your boss is working. Your boss could have a completely different set of priorities. Maybe they don't have children. Maybe they don't have
Mhm.
priorities that go beyond the workplace. You do. So how do you balance that? So you need to start to identify those red flags, right? When you
Mhm.
go into your boss's office and say, hey, I may have mentioned this in a clubhouse once, but if you go and say, like, listen, I'm feeling really stressed out. Like, I feel like I have a lot on my plate. What do I do? And if they brush you off and say, well, that's your problem, that's a red flag,
Mhm.
right? So there's a lot of different components that in as employees, there's two different sort of facets of this. The employees need to identify the red flags in the organization, and the organization also needs to identify, like, are my employees starting to burn out? Because burnout and stress is contagious. If one person has it, I can guarantee you other people have it.
Yes, for sure. And now that we're post pandemic, are you seeing a change in people's attitudes? Are these conversations easier to have, or are they more difficult to have? Because while everyone's working at home, or there's this viewpoint of seeing people as complete people with families and things now, which I don't think necessarily was pre-pandemic. But you also have a fear of losing your job, right? Like some people are losing their jobs now during pandemic. So are you seeing a shift in how this is being discussed? Are people still scared to talk about it?
There is a little bit of fear still in some organizations. I've noticed that. I guess also depends on the industry that you're working in. I
Mhm.
know in healthcare, education, legal profession now, even entrepreneurs are starting to talk more about it because, again, if you just search the word burnout in Google and look at the trend, there's this thing called Google Trends. You will start to notice how quickly that word has been like increasing in the Google Trends over the last couple of years now. It's because we are bringing this concept to front and center to our leaders and saying, hey, this is what's happening. And
Mhm.
employees actually feel a lot more heard. There needs to be this dialogue where employees feel like, oh my God, you care about me. I feel heard. If I feel heard, that means you care about me. If you care about me, that means you're going to give me some resources that I can start to really prioritize my wellness. And then they will give back more to the company. So there is that shift happening super slowly, I would say, not as quickly as we want it to be.
Mhm.
But I mean, all over the internet now, burnout is just everywhere. Wellness is everywhere. Like you said earlier as well, if we can start to think about the one good thing that happened in the pandemic, maybe it is the way we work, and the future of
Mhm.
work, really should have wellness in its core.
Yes, for sure. And I feel like a lot of women are impacted more by burnout because of our obligations to family and then the work pressures on top of that. And especially with pandemic, with the kids and the childcare um, issues that most people had, what would be your advice to women that find themselves in this situation where they feel like I'm heading toward burnout? What would be your advice for them? What's the first step?
Yeah, I think if you're heading towards burnout and that those symptoms have become really severe, for example, you're getting things like uh, you're close to panic attacks, you're getting insomnia, you're having that brain fog, that memory loss, right? Those are some severe symptoms of burnout. Once you
Mhm.
once you start to get those symptoms, the best thing you can do is really just talk to your employer and just say, I need to take a step back here and really give myself the opportunity to revive and rewire the things that have malfunctioned in my body, because the truth of the matter is, if you don't do that, the complications that happen post burnout, they are so severe and they are long term. I remember the one thing that when my physician, when I went to him and I had a list of symptoms that I was experiencing, and I said, I have this, all of these things are happening. I don't know what to do. He said, I think you should take some time off. No, 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 I can't take time off. I have too many responsibilities. I have a team. And I gave him like a bunch of excuses to say time off is not a solution for me. I cannot do that. And then we negotiated as a physician and a patient. We negotiated to say, okay, well, what can we do? And he
Mhm.
said to me, if you don't change your ways, Sumana, there's going to be a point where you cannot undo the damages you're going to do to your body. Is that how you want to live your life? And that
Mhm.
really scared me, because you
Mhm.
cannot take back what's been done. If you get diabetes, you're going to have diabetes. If you get hypertension, most likely you have this for the rest of your life. So there's things that happen and you can't take it back. And that was like, no way, I can't do that. So we went into this sort of like, oh, I'm not going to take time off altogether. I will strategically take less on my plate, right? So that was sort of the first step, is like, maybe I'm in sort of this red zone. I'm doing 120 kilometers an hour. Let me maybe move into a space where I can maybe do 50 kilometers an hour. Maybe I got to take a few things off my plate, still continue to work because I like my job, and stay here. But the other option also for people is, you know what, I got to completely disconnect. There's too much going on. And if I don't stop, I'm going to get really, really sick.
Yeah, you make a really good point, and it's amazing that you were able to have that conversation with your doctor because I feel like a lot of women aren't. And my friends know that my best friend passed away this summer, and she had a heart attack at the age of 41. It was very shocking, and really, she didn't follow up with her health, and she wasn't monitoring. She wasn't paying attention to those stress indicators that we see every day. You think something will just pass, but it's really important to talk to your doctor and set up a plan, I think. So I think that's a really great strategy, Sumana. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, even men, actually, especially men, they don't want to go see their doctor until it's too late,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I even had a woman, a client who messaged me the other day to say that, you know what, I have so much going on. I need to make a doctor's appointment, but I don't have time to do it. And the only response I gave was, you have to make time. This is a
Hmm.
priority. You can't say, I can't breathe, right? That is you breathing, regardless. You've made that a priority. You
Hmm.
have to make it a priority to go see your doctor if you are feeling, not yourself, like whatever those symptoms are. I was really, really good. I would just write them down in my book, and I would be like, my blood pressure has been like really high for the
Hmm.
last so many weeks. I don't know what's happening. I think I'm going to die. And then he said, let's monitor your blood pressure for several weeks, several months. But it was me showing data again, because maybe I'm data analytic type of a person. I
Hmm.
always write down my symptoms, and I'm like, this has been going on since like February. This isn't just going
Yeah.
away. So, write it down. Whatever you're feeling, if it's you feel like I've had this for a while now, write it down.
Yes, that's another great point that you do need to keep track and journal. And yeah, excellent point, Simona. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up our conversation now. And something I'd like to ask all the women I talk to is, do you have a favorite book or a book you would recommend for our audience so that they can learn more about your topic of burnout or wellness?
Yes, there's a super small book. I know when you're burnt out, you probably don't want to read a book. The book that I highly recommend that you can listen to is How to Complete the Stress Response Cycle. Burnout, this How to Complete the Stress Response Cycle by Amelia and Emily Nagoski. It's a great book. It's on Audible, and it really is, I think, geared towards women
Mhm.
understanding what some of the challenges are being a woman in the workplace, and how we can really start to identify those stress triggers like you mentioned, Taya, and then how to like complete that loop. There's a lot of wonderful things in that book. If you don't want to read it, I highly recommend you listen to it. Every chapter is read by one of the authors and is
Mhm.
super, 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 super good.
Great. Yeah, I will link that in the comments for any of our listeners that want to read that or listen to that. So, awesome recommendation. Thank you, Sumana, and thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it, Taya. Thank you so much for like really, highlighting this really important topic. I think we can talk about this for like another hour if we had the time, but it's really, really
Mhm.
important that we start to recognize our symptoms, our stress triggers, have those conversations. Don't wait until you're in the red zone. I always say start to pick up your warnings, just like your car, little warning light will come out if the tire pressure is off or whatever. Listen to your body's warning signs and get treatment before you get to crisis mode. That's the last thing I want to say.
Thank you. Yes, prevention, prevention, prevention.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. It's nice to be here.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.